and Kurt Bardella, former House Oversight Committee spokesperson for Republicans. Allie, first fill us in on what kind of impact you think today's hearing could have on the congressional investigations.
Well, look, it's yet another moment for congressional Republicans to bring up these things about Hunter Biden. We saw them even just in the last 2 weeks or so do hearings focused on the IRS investigation of his taxes, whistleblowers coming forward saying that they felt that that was handled in a political manner and that he was basically getting a softball deal from the Department of Justice. Now, what's important about this moment as we watch him go into the courthouse, it's momentous in and of itself for the fact that it will have political ramifications on his father, the current president, his reelection bid, and also the way that Republicans are trying to put Hunter Biden on the ballot in so many ways. I know this is something that Mike Memoli has talked about before, the ways in which these House Republicans have not gotten anything specific or tangible yet in order to tie Biden to his son. Nevertheless, this hearing today allows them yet another moment for us to be all eyes on the courthouse and for them to continue pushing these allegations and pushing them with the power of the gavel behind them as they try to continue into these investigations.
Kurt, Republicans have been arguing that the DOJ meddled in this investigation to benefit Hunter Biden. They point to these two former IRS investigators who testified before the House Oversight Committee, and this was just last week. One of them says that he heard U.S. Attorney David Weiss tell investigators who are working on this case that he was, quote, not the deciding person on whether charges were filed. Weiss has disputed the allegations. He says he's willing to testify. So do you think Republicans are acting in good faith in their investigation?
Absolutely not. I mean, nothing about this has been in good faith. In fact, these kind of investigations, they're nothing more than taxpayer finance witch hunts. They have been doing it backwards. They have been making bombastic claims, conspiracy theory-laced accusations without a shred of actual evidence to back them up. They have these hearings and conduct what they call investigations to try to prove their rhetoric. That's not how oversight's supposed to work. I spent many years working at the Oversight Committee for Republicans, and I can tell you back then, we tried to manage expectations. We tried to make sure that we didn't get ahead of the evidence, ahead of the testimony, ahead of the documents. James Comer, Jim Jordan, Oversight Judiciary Committee Republicans, they're doing the exact opposite of that. And they have yet to this day been able to produce a single shred of evidence that ties anything directly to President Joe Biden. It's just been a colossal waste of time and nothing more than political propaganda.
And yet House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is talking about escalating. He's indicated that he would support an impeachment inquiry into President Biden over the allegations. Here's how he explains his rationale.
You understand what impeachment inquiry is. It's not impeachment. It allows Congress to investigate by giving Congress the full power to get the information they need. It's the way people should go about investigating. So let me put yourselves in our place. It doesn't matter who's in the majority or not.
Kurt, your reaction to that argument?
Well, that's a bunch of utter nonsense, because last time I checked, there are a bunch of committees that are controlled by Kevin McCarthy's Republican majority that have been doing these investigations for many, many, many months now, and they haven't produced anything. Why do they think that an impeachment proceeding would somehow produce information that hasn't come to light either by the congressional Republican investigations or even by the Justice Department FBI investigations? The idea that they're going to somehow unearth some, red flag, silver bullet document, testimony, evidence that's going to blow everything into the open is just folly. This impeachment talk is something that they have been saying going back to before the midterm elections. Members of Congress and the Republican conference have been talking about it wanting to impeach Joe Biden as an act of retribution for the two impeachments that Donald Trump had to endure. So I think everybody sees that this is just political. There's no appetite for this amongst the American people, and it's their way of trying to distract away from the very real legal jeopardy that Donald Trump finds himself into right now.
Allie, let's circle back to the potential testimony of David Weiss, the U.S. attorney who's in charge of the Hunter Biden case. He has talked about perhaps testifying, throwing out some dates late September or mid-October, the DOJ noting that the most appropriate time for any testimony on these subjects is after the matter is closed. What more do you have on this?
Well, that's exactly right. And it's why today's hearing with Hunter Biden entering this plea is so important, because it marks sort of the end of the beginning of this investigation and does make it so that it comes closer to wrapping up, and it makes it so that Weiss could be available to these committees. Now, there's a question about whether or not the fall is going to be soon enough for these folks. They have been pressing for answers on this, and we've watched them try to escalate it in past instances where there were political or political themes, at least, to investigations that were happening. We watched, for example, when the Manhattan District Attorney indicted the former president, the ways in which the judiciary and other committees mobilized to try to get answers in front of their committee in an attempt to sort of muddy the waters on the political front. That is likely what we'll see here again. I do think it's notable, though, and Kurt knows this from his time here in Congress and on the Oversight Committee, there are things that you get with the power of the gavel, being the majorities in control of these committees. We've watched Republicans sort of flex that gavel power in terms of the way that they've run these investigations. But McCarthy saying that he's at least open to an impeachment inquiry is both him placating his right flank, who have been pushing, as Kurt said, for this kind of an impeachment, but it's also him trying to temper those folks, saying that they might be able to get a few steps ahead if they were to open an impeachment inquiry without going into full-blown impeachment. That's because there are Republicans on the right flank who want that, but there are just as many moderates who are going to have to go home to their Biden districts and explain why they're focusing on this as opposed to the issues that they ran on. The people who I think of first and foremost here are the so-called majority makers in the New York districts, who have districts that are more moderate. They don't necessarily want to see this red meat against the president. And that's something that's going to put those members in a tough position. And it might be why you're watching McCarthy do a little bit to appease the right and a little bit to keep his moderates happy. And that's the balancing act that we've seen him do over the course of the last few months since he's been speaker. It's a thankless place to be in. It puts him certainly in another rock and a hard place. But as he's doing that on the impeachment front, he's also balancing a coming spending battle with a possible shutdown at the end of September. All of these are the dynamics that Congress is going to, frankly, leave with for August and come back squarely in the middle of in September.
You're so good about giving us the nitty-gritty of happenings on Capitol Hill with the political maneuvering. No, we appreciate it. It's hard to make sense of what goes on there sometimes. But, Kurt, I am thinking about what Frank Figliuzzi brought up, that under the Trump administration, Republican lawmakers were not interested in investigating then President Trump's family business dealings or Jared Kushner's dealings and possible conflicts of interest. So given the recent developments and what we're seeing play out there on the Hill involving Hunter Biden in this investigation, what do you make of this apparent hypocrisy?
Yeah, it's pretty glaring, and it just underscores and illustrates how this is purely political and not actually evidentiary or fact-based in any way. Hunter Biden's a private citizen. Hunter Biden never worked in the West Wing. He's not part of the inner workings of the White House at any time in the same way that Jared Kushner or Ivanka Trump were. And when you look at even just the financial resources that the Trump family has been the beneficiary of, from questionable sources and questions about how they arrange those financial dealings, it completely dwarfs anything compared to Hunter Biden. So the fact that they're willing to look the other way while Donald Trump's family has done that which they are accusing Hunter Biden of doing, just tells everyone that there's really no substance there, that it's just political theater, that it's a 2024 mechanism. Just as Kevin McCarthy once said that the Benghazi investigation was designed to take down Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, this is the same thing they're trying to do with Hunter Biden and trying to take down Joe Biden. So it's just kind of wash, rinse, repeat, the Republican playbook. And I think it also just kind of illustrates the fact that their policies, their extreme agenda, their crusade for taking away women's rights, it's so unpopular that they want to spend every minute of every day talking about anything but the things they're actually doing, the policies they're actually enacting, the policies they're trying to force on the American people. They know it's so unpopular because they don't have the giant 60-seat majority they promised us they would have in the midterm elections. So now they're trying to do this misdirection and use the theater of congressional hearings to distract away from the other stuff that's wildly unpopular.
Kurt Bardella and Ali Vitale, thank you both.